It's not our fault that we're distrusting. With the legal system as bad as it is, where, remember we talked this morning about the whistleblower who can't be named, that went after Trump, right? Like, remember that? Remember when whistleblowers were like sacrosanct and they were heroes? And then you had whistleblowers that came out and said, hey, the Biden administration and the FBI under Chris Wray's targeting us because they wanted us to go after, we spoke up about going after parents at school board meetings, or the IRS whistleblowers. We wanted to look into Hunter Biden stuff. Like, now all of a sudden whistleblowers, we don't believe them. They're garbage. They're trash. So when you have these sort of lies that are constantly told to you in this two-tiered system, you can't help but be skeptical. For all we know, this gentleman unfortunately did take his own life. I don't know the specifics of it, but you can't help but be skeptical when powerful corporations that are like cutting corners, all of a sudden when someone's going to try to hold them to account, it just so happened at the Zero Hour, that he took his own life.
I don't believe for a second that he killed himself. And the funny thing is, the journalists are just the stupidest people in the world, because they're always like, you must be a conspiracy theorist. And I'm like, if the argument is a guy was blowing the whistle on Boeing and in the middle of blowing the whistle and providing testimony and then was found dead after warning a family friend that he would never kill himself, that's called fishy. And if you lack the cognitive function to ask questions, it must be very difficult for you to put on your shoes.
Did he warn a family friend, or is that him? Did he go on the news and say that? And then
no, it was a family friend. He told.
Okay. No, and your point about journalists is great, because like conspiracy theorists, if you think about whether they're true or not, are almost always the most interesting stories or potential stories. So if you are a journalist and you're cocking around like poo-pooing and using the term conspiracy theory as a slander, as a journalist, your job is to basically investigate every conspiracy theory that comes to your desk and determine whether it's true or not. You don't just like throw it out in the trash bin because you're afraid of, being called crazy. That's your job as a journalist, is to find out. And those are always the most interesting ones.
I remember I was in New York hanging at a bar with a bunch of journalists, and it was like 6 months after Osama bin Laden had been killed and then dumped from the helicopter or whatever. And I'm hanging out with these journalists, and they were talking about it. And then I said something like, that whole thing just played out like some stupid action movie. And this one journalist just snapped. He instantly got super angry. And he went from light conversation to, I'm so sick of you conspiracy theories with your insane arguments about we didn't actually get him. And I was like, bro, what?
You said his hypnotism word.
I did not say it never happened. Yeah. I said the story played out like a bad action movie. And he's like, what does that mean? I was like, it means that they did a raid on the compound. He grabbed his wife. Then they captured him, killed him, and then dumped him out of a helicopter. Like the plot of I don't know what you want me to say. I said the thing played out like a bad action movie. I didn't say it didn't happen. But these people are so do not question the official story of the government. They get emotionally charged.
Yeah, it is like that. Although it didn't used to be that way. I think a lot of that came into being with Obama because everyone had like such a huge hard-on for him that they just were like, oh, the government must be trustworthy now because our guy is in there. So now the government is trustworthy. And then under the Trump, they freaked out. And then under Biden, they're back to total complicity.
It is wild to me that Obama was the one that they were like, this guy is trustworthy. We should definitely trust everything he says. He doesn't seem like a career politician at all.
Right. It's because he barely was one yet. I mean, he was.
His entire career was about politics so far.
I think it's an interesting question of how did this come about? How did the media become? And for sure that's one. I mean, there's a lot of left-wing people in the media, and then they thought Obama was their savior, so they didn't want to question him as roughly. Another from just being in that world and walking around Capitol Hill and for a brief period Epic Times, which is kind of sort of becoming mainstream conservative media. You realize that one of the most important things to these DC outlets is getting, quote unquote access, where it's you want to get the interview with Mitt Romney.
Yeah, you want them to
then you can brag about it. It's bragging rights.
For sure.
And Mitt Romney is not going to give you an exclusive if you've just done a story about Epstein and his client list. So basically, they kind of organically, or they just kind of over time morph themselves into these mouthpieces of the state so that they can get the access to those basically government celebrities and things like that.